Area 51 is a distraction. The real prize is in eastern Alaska. So by this point, everyone is no doubt well aware of the Area 51 memes and all the hubbub surrounding them. Apparently, over 1 million people are set to storm the perimeter on September 20th of this year. Should be interesting, but let's be honest for a second. I doubt it will happen. And even if it did, even if by some ridiculous miracle, they manage to overwhelm the most powerful military on Earth and infiltrate a top-secret base, I don't think they would be exactly thrilled with the results. I'll just come right out and say it, I guess. Area 51 is a red herring. It's a distraction, and it pretty much always has been. Nothing out there but sand, reclusive scientists, and some crusty-ass lake at this point. I mean, think about it. If Area 51 is one of the most top-secret and covert black sites in the world, then why does everyone know about it? How secret can a secret be if everyone knows a secret? For God's sake, even Obama acknowledged its existence a while back. That's the whole point of it. They want you distracted, so you don't look for the others. But why take my word for it? Who am I anyways? Just some pleb on the internet that decided to cash in on a trend for some cloud and perhaps a bit of that sweet, sweet karma, right? Well, yes, but actually no. That may be who I am now. But I was once a person of particular interest to the United States government. Most people knew me as Mr. Blue. Not my real name, but it is easier to pronounce. I used to be a pilot, did that for many years and loved every second of it. I tell you, there's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. You might crap your pants a little, but it's all just part of the experience, really. Now, unfortunately, the type of work I did was above top secret, and for all of our safeties, I cannot go into any further detail on what I actually did or who I actually worked for. One day, I was out on a classified reconnaissance mission in a certain area where I should not have been. I'll apologize here for the vague details of certain things, but you got to understand, the things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. They would kill me 10 times over for uttering a word of it. So here's to hoping that doesn't happen. Anyways, the mission was going as planned when suddenly my instruments started going berserk on my dash. Air pressure inside the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges looked like they were playing ping-pong with each together. Everything began to rattle like crazy, and my alarms erupted into a symphony of irritation. Next thing I know, I see this bright light soar past me at an ungodly speed. The shock wave it produced was so violent that it shredded the hull of my craft. In a split second, I went from casually flying along to suddenly regaining consciousness as I vomited headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my chute before I splattered, but as I touched down, I almost wished I hadn't. There I was met by an awaiting entourage of at least 24 men in winter chemo suits and masks. They all pointed their weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognized as English. I tried my best to calm them down and appear unthreatening, but that didn't stop them from wrenching me into a pair of handcuffs and hauling me into one of their APCs. They began to drive away, and the real severity of the situation hit me. I was not going to be saved. The people I worked for had never said it, but it was always well known that if ever you were captured, then you were pretty much on your own. With that in my mind, I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started interrogating me. It may seem cowardly, but I was not about to be brutally tortured for a former ally which would never come to bail me out. Yeah, the government says they don't torture people, but trust me, when they really want to know something, there's no tactic too extreme, and they really wanted to know something. So I told them about who I worked for, what my mission was, where I grew up, all that jazz. It was all fabricated, but they took the bait regardless, thanks to their severe distress to the Russians at the time. They were actually pretty cool after that. I mean, they wouldn't let me leave their custody, but that was better than being dead, or at least it at first. They transported me away from my initial interrogation place into a secure facility somewhere nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time. but from the rumbling of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding open multiple times, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping, I could tell they had taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after that, I stepped off the elevator and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face, thick gray beard, and eyes that looked etched from concrete. He wore a black suit with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I didn't recognize. He stepped in front of everyone and outstretched his arms while staring me in the eye. "Welcome to your new home." And ever so a slight grin slithered onto his face as he said it. I glanced down the dismal gray hallways, which seemed to stretch out further than I could see in multiple directions. They lead me down the hall on the right, past dozens of locked corridors and rooms before ushering me into a cell. My handcuffs were removed soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man that had welcomed me to the facility then approached the window and pushed the intercom button. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there is any reason why our time spent together has to be unfriendly. I apologize for all of this, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution we must take. I hope you understand." I took a moment, then nodded back to Wonderful. "We will have dinner set to you soon. If you require anything, then please notify one of the guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strolled down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility I eventually came to know as FEZ. I don't think it's the official name, but I heard several personality I've never heard a voice refer to it by the acronym over the years. I still don't know exactly what it stands for. Forbidden Enclosed Ziggurat, Forsaken Evil Zoo, Force Ejaculation Zeal, Fabulous Elf Zombies. The best I could really come up with was Fortified Experimental Zone. It makes the most sense, too, all things considered. At first, it wasn't actually too that. The staff was nice. They cooked great food, and there was plenty to see around the base. Although every once in a while, I would hear the screams just barely echoing through the vents. They interviewed me probably 100 more times after that, and were especially interested in the craft which I was piloting. The craft in question was one of our own top-secret technologies, but unfortunately, it had been blown to smithereens by whatever that light was, so I couldn't tell them much about it. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon enough we became what some might even consider to be friends. I became especially with one of the scientists there named Kevin. Kevin was a smart guy, comical too, and explained quite a lot of things to me. He and I would spend hours talking on countless occasions. He was my only real glimpse into what was happening in the outside world. He'd bring in books and movies for us to enjoy together. He kept me updated on everything, and over the next 30 years, we developed a close friendship that I will always treasure. I must have displayed some intellectual potential, because they eventually started asking for my input on various curiosities stationed throughout the base. They only did it because I had sworn them complete loyalty and would never be allowed to leave the base anyways. But for me, it was just nice to feel included. The base itself was absolutely colossal. They always blindfolded me during transport to any location. But one time, I caught a glimpse of the buttons in the elevator. There had to have been at least 50 of them on that panel. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown blocks. There were guards posted in every cell, and I heard some very strange noises emanating around me as we traversed the halls. I thought for sure they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and prepared myself accordingly as the howls of unseen things echoed throughout the halls. The lead scientist, Dr. Rose Sheevil, rolled back a two-way mirror curtain, and my heart froze from anticipation. In the cell before us, there was nothing more than a human girl in a gray jumps. She was young, maybe 5 years old or so, but there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary about her. I looked at Dr. Rose Sheevil, and he flexed his cranial muscles before pressing a button. I heard the sound of gas seep into the room. A few 10 seconds passed when the girl suddenly shrilled like a banshee. Her head tilted back, and I saw jagged needle-like teeth emerge from her mouth. Her jet-black eyes then lurched towards us, and she lunged at the window. She struck it hard and fell back to the ground, snarling and kissing like some ravenous jackal. Dr. Rose Sheevil then pressed a button again, cutting the gas and posing a question. You ever seen anything like her, Mister? All I could do was shake my head slowly as I watched the young demon child talk about on the other side of the glass. They found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating him and appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly felt like vomiting, but I said nothing, only staring back at the unusually gruesome little girl. What the hell was she? Unfortunately, I never was told anything else about her, and I doubt the personnel knew much more anyways. They came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. A giant, brownish, orange-haired primate that walked upright and seemed to respond to facial movements. A humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared equipment. A golden chest that would instantly kill anything that touched it. A 10-foot-tall creature wrapped in vines that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into environments with perfect camouflage. A monstrous fish at least 80 feet in length frozen in nitrogen. Various subheric creatures that I'm guessing were the results of relentless genetic tampering. I had never seen anything like it. All of the monstrosities housed there, and the secrets buried in their possession. They also asked for my advice on a certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. They told me that for decades there had been hundreds of unsolved cases of human disappearances that seemed to defy all explanation. Young children would be found on cliff that they could not have possibly reached, while old and frail people would be discovered dozens of miles away from where they had last been seen only a few hours later. Most of them would never be found at all, though. I could almost see the fear dripping from their eyes as they relayed case after case of the recorded incidents. And it was clear, although not said, that they had no idea what the cause was. Unfortunately, neither did I, as it was the first I'd ever heard of the bizarre phenomenon. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel better or worse. Throughout all of my years there, I'd always found one thing peculiar. After all the weird and terrifying things they showed to me, there was never any mention of extraterrestrials. That's what everyone thinks these black site facilities house after all. But nevertheless, they made no mention of it. That made me smile a bit when I thought about it, because they had no idea how close they were. The closest thing they had was this weird tentacle creature with a ring set of teeth in its mouth. It looked almost like an heel, but had just 4 iridescent green eyes and a ring around its head. It didn't live in the water either, but instead slithered around on the ground in a very swift and very unsettling motion. They said its DNA resembled nothing like anything they had ever found on Earth before, hence the reason they believed, but were not certain of its otherworldly origins. Kevin and I got to talking back in quarters one night as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to just chat as friends late into the night. He told me a lot about himself that he had never mentioned before. He showed me pictures of his wife and his son that had been taken from him. Kevin admitted his son had died in a car crash a couple of years back, while his wife passed 2 years later of cancer. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for my dear friend of some 30 years. Kevin was in his early 50s, but you'd never know it with the enthusiasm in his voice. It was during that conversation Kevin ended up mentioning something I found particularly interesting. He told that he believed that if an alien species were advanced enough to traverse the galactic canopy and reach Earth, then they would obviously be quite intelligent. He said he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday aliens held back on destroying humanity. He thought they'd be a lot more subtle than that. Think about it. You find something intelligent which represents almost no threat to you, and the first thing you do is try to kill it? Kevin asked skeptically, as I considered his words for myself, that it'd just be a waste, and no species that fancies themselves as advanced beings would do something so brash. At least I hoped they wouldn't. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look mixed with a unique intrigue that almost glistened in his gray eyes. Even if they thought we were destroying on their own planet or something, why would they care? There are trillions of other planets in the Milky Way alone. They could pick any of them if they wanted natural resources. I chuckled to myself, almost sensing where the conversation was headed. It's not the planets we. Thereafter, I replied. Kevin snapped and pointed his finger at me as his face lit up. Exactly. They want to study us, learn how we operate, how we organize, and how we live. Kevin's hand motions turned eccentric, and I saw his access badge jostle around his neck. He took another sip of brandy and continued. They'd probably learn more about us than we even know about ourselves. I mean, granted, they have to be more intelligent. They could learn,